My name is Anjali, and if you had seen me just a year ago, you would never have guessed that my quiet life would one day cross paths with a billionaire family. I was just an ordinary waitress. Too ordinary. Perhaps working in a fine dining restaurant where people walked in wearing designer suits and glittering diamonds, while I polished glasses and prayed I wouldn't stumble over my own feet. Shyness has always been my shadow. Even as a little girl, I preferred corners over crowds, silence over chatter. My colleagues often teased me for never raising my voice, for never joining their jokes, for hiding behind the counter whenever wealthy guests arrived. But I didn't mind. My silence was my protection, and in that silence I carried secrets no one else knew. The restaurant I worked in was one of the most prestigious in the city. Chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen fireworks, the walls glowed with golden lamps, and the crisp linen on each table seemed almost too fine to touch. Guests came not just to eat but to be seen. Powerful businessmen, celebrities, politicians, they all passed through those tall glass doors. And every time they did, I tightened my ponytail, adjusted my blue shirt and red apron, and whispered a prayer that tonight would go smoothly. It was on a chilly winter evening that everything began. The restaurant was buzzing more than usual. I overheard the maitre d' whispering that a billionaire was coming for dinner. Not just any billionaire, the Roy family. They owned shipping lines, hotels, tech companies, and more than half of the city's real estate. To us, they were untouchable gods in human form, and now they were going to sit at one of our tables. My hands trembled as I set the wine glasses. Why did I feel as though this night would be different? When the clock struck 8, the door opened and I saw him. Jason Roy, tall, striking, every movement of his like a rehearsed performance of power and grace. His tailored blue suit seemed sculpted onto him. His piercing eyes scanned the restaurant like they owned not only the room but the world itself. Behind him walked his mother, a dignified woman with silver hair swept back into a perfect bun. She carried herself with such elegance that even the chandeliers seemed to bow lower in her presence. I noticed something quickly. While Jason greeted the staff with a polite nod, his mother remained silent. She didn't smile, didn't even look at the maitre d' who welcomed her. Instead, she sat down slowly, her eyes distant, her lips pressed together. The room hushed. Guests tried not to stare, but every head turned in their direction. I was assigned to their table. My heart pounded against my ribs as if begging me to run. I had never served anyone so powerful before, and one mistake could cost me my job. I approached quietly, notebook in hand, rehearsing my lines. "Good evening. Would you like to start with sparkling or still water?" But as I drew closer, something inside me shifted. Jason spoke softly to his mother, but she didn't reply. She simply looked at him and tilted her head slightly, her fingers brushing the table as if searching for something more than words. And then it struck me. Her silence wasn't indifference. It was deafness. I froze. Memories rushed back. My childhood neighbor, a kind woman who had taught me sign language because her son couldn't hear. I hadn't used it in years, but the gestures were etched into my mind like scars on stone. The waiter beside me nudged my arm, whispering, "Go on, Anjali. Don't just stand there." My lips were dry. My hands trembled. And yet against every shy instinct, I slowly raised my hands and signed, "Good evening. May I take your order?" Her eyes widened. For a moment, time stopped. The silver-haired woman's expression shifted from distant to alive, as though I had unlocked a door no one else knew existed. She leaned forward, her lips trembling, and with shaky hands, she signed back, "You know sign language?" Jason turned sharply toward me, his brows furrowed. He hadn't expected this either. I nodded timidly, my cheeks burning. "Yes," I whispered, though my hands continued to move in her language. The woman's stern face melted into the warmest smile I had ever seen. She touched her chest, her fingers spelling her name slowly. "Clara," I replied. "Nice to meet you, Clara." Jason's eyes softened, curiosity flickering in them. For the first time, his powerful composure cracked. He looked at me, not like a waitress, but like someone holding a secret no one else in the room understood. The restaurant buzzed on around us. Dishes clattered, glasses chimed, and laughter echoed from distant tables. But at that moment, the three of us existed in a bubble of silence and gestures, where words were unnecessary and hearts spoke louder than voices. I guided Clara through the menu, signing each option with care. She laughed quietly at one of my clumsy signs, correcting me gently, and for the first time that night, she looked genuinely happy. The staff whispered behind me. Guests stared. A shy waitress in a blue shirt was speaking in a language none of them understood, and the billionaire's mother was glowing with joy. When I finally walked back to the counter, my colleague grabbed my arm. What was that? Since when do you know? Whatever that was. Sign language, I murmured, still flushed. I learned it a long time ago. Jason's gaze followed me as I poured water into glasses at another table. I pretended not to notice, but every time I looked up, his eyes were there, sharp, studying, almost questioning. And deep inside, a thought grew louder. Tonight has changed something. And nothing will ever be the same again. Jason Roy. The name alone carried weight. Newspapers wrote about his business triumphs, magazines celebrated his wealth, and gossip columns whispered about his personal life. But sitting just a few feet away from me, in that golden-lit restaurant, I saw a man who wasn't only the confident billionaire the world believed him to be. He was also a son, trapped between responsibility, love, and silence. After that first moment when I signed to his mother, the atmosphere at their table shifted. Clara Roy was no longer the distant, withdrawn figure people whispered about. She came alive in her own way, her hands moving with surprising grace, her eyes lighting up each time I replied. For years, she must have sat at tables like this, invisible in the noise of the world, spoken over, nodded at, but never heard. And now, a shy waitress, me, had given her voice back. But while Clara bloomed with every gesture, Jason seemed conflicted. I noticed the way his jaw tightened as he watched me converse with her. He didn't interrupt, didn't pull me away, but his sharp gaze never left us. To him, I was just a waitress in a blue shirt and apron, yet somehow, I had stepped into a part of his world he hadn't unlocked himself. When I excused myself to let them enjoy their meal, Jason leaned toward his mother. He signed awkwardly, his movements stiff, unsure. I recognized the struggle instantly. He knew some sign language, but not enough to keep up with her speed. Clara tried to help him, smiling patiently, slowing her gestures down. But I could see the frustration in Jason's eyes. A man who negotiated billion-dollar deals with ease now struggled to express even the simplest of sentences to his own mother. And that broke something inside me. As I stood behind the counter polishing glasses, I overheard guests whispering, "Isn't that Jason Roy? My God, he's even more handsome in person. Who's the woman with him?" "That's his mother, I think. She's deaf, poor thing. No wonder she looks so cold. They say she rarely attends public events. This is the first time she's been seen in months." My chest tightened at their careless words. Poor thing. They didn't see what I had, just seen. The fire, the intelligence, the wit in Clara's eyes when she signed. They only saw her silence. By dessert, Jason excused himself to take a phone call outside, leaving Clara alone at the table. I approached cautiously, carrying a tray of crème brûlée. She looked up, her silver hair catching the chandelier's glow, and signed quickly. "You are different. Why do you know this language?" Her question pierced me. I set the tray down gently and signed back. "When I was a girl, my neighbor's son was deaf. His mother taught me. She said silence isn't emptiness, it's another kind of music." Clara's eyes softened. She touched my hand briefly, her gesture tender yet powerful. "You are kind. Not many would bother." For a moment, I wanted to cry. No one had called me kind in years. To most people, I was invisible, just a quiet waitress taking orders. But here, sitting with a billionaire's mother, my silence was seen, understood, and valued. Jason returned then, slipping his phone into his pocket. His eyes flickered between us, suspicious, but also curious. He sat down and asked, his voice low but firm. "What did she say?" I hesitated. Should I repeat her words? Or keep them private? Clara squeezed my hand under the table, her message clear. "Tell him." So I signed and spoke softly. She said I was kind. Jason's expression shifted. A strange silence followed, one not born of deafness, but of unspoken emotions. He gave a short nod, almost reluctant, then picked up his spoon and stirred his untouched dessert. For the rest of the evening, he didn't say much, but I could feel his gaze on me, weighing, measuring, as if he was trying to solve a puzzle that had no clear answer. When they finally rose to leave, Jason placed a generous tip on the table without a word. Clara, however, held my hands once more. Her fingers spelled slowly. "Thank you. You gave me a voice tonight." I swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "It was an honor," I signed back. Jason guided her out of the restaurant, his hand lightly on her arm. But just before the door closed behind them, he looked back at me. His eyes held something unreadable. Admiration, suspicion, maybe even longing. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in my small apartment, staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail. The look in Clara's eyes, the warmth of her smile, the weight of Jason's gaze. Why did it matter so much? Why did they matter to me at all? The next few days passed quietly, but I couldn't shake the memory. Until one evening, as I tied my apron and prepared for another shift, the maitre d' rushed toward me, flustered. "They're back," he hissed. "Table 5, the Roys, again." My knees nearly gave out. And so it began. Clara requested me personally each time, and with every visit, I became more than just a waitress. I became her translator, her bridge to the world. I told her jokes in sign language that made her laugh so hard other guests turned to stare. I explained dishes to her in ways no menu ever could. She even taught me new signs, her patient hands guiding mine until we both laughed at my clumsiness. But Jason was different. He sat quietly, watching. Sometimes he tried to join our conversations, fumbling through the signs he half remembered. But his attempts often ended with him shaking his head in frustration. He was a man used to control, used to winning, yet here he was, vulnerable. One night, as I poured him a glass of water, he asked suddenly, "How do you do it?" I blinked. "Do what, sir?" "Make her smile like that," he said, his voice low. "I've hired the best therapists, tutors, even companions. None of them reached her like you have." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. Maybe she just wanted someone to listen. Really listen. He studied me for a long time, then looked away. "Perhaps," he murmured. That was the moment I realized something. Behind his wealth, his power, his steel-like confidence, Jason Roy was lonely too. And for reasons I couldn't explain, that realization scared me and warmed me at the same time. The nights grew colder, and yet every evening the Roys appeared at the restaurant. It felt as if the golden chandeliers burned brighter. For me, their visits became more than shifts at work. They became lifelines. I was no longer just another invisible waitress blending into the background. For Clara Roy, I was someone who spoke her language. For Jason, well, I still wasn't sure what I was for him. The whispers among the staff grew louder. "Why does the old lady always ask for her? She must be faking it to get a bigger tip." "Don't get too comfortable, Angeli. Rich people don't mix with our kind," I pretended not to hear. But the truth was, every word cut. I had never sought their attention, certainly not the billionaires, and yet, destiny seemed to have written me into their story. One evening, after the dinner rush, Clara asked me to sit with her for a moment. Jason had stepped outside to answer another urgent call, his deep voice echoing through the glass doors. Clara touched my hand, her eyes shimmering with questions. Her hands moved gracefully in sign language. "Why do you work here?" You are young, bright. You could be more, I hesitated. No one had ever asked me that before, not with genuine curiosity. My colleagues only asked how many shifts I could cover. My landlord only asked when I'd pay the rent. I signed back slowly, carefully. Life didn't give me many choices, but Clara didn't let it go. Tell me. And so for the first time in years, I opened the door to my past. When I was 15, my father suffered a stroke. He lost his speech, and for months he was locked in silence. We couldn't afford expensive therapists, so I taught myself the basics of sign language to communicate with him. I'd sit by his bed every evening, moving my hands clumsily until he smiled at my attempts. But fate can be cruel. My father passed away just 2 years later. I never got to tell him how much I loved him in his language. My mother fell into depression, our savings drained, and I dropped out of college to work. The restaurant became my survival. As I signed these fragments of my life, Clara's eyes grew moist. She reached across the table, her fingers trembling slightly, and spelled, "Your father would be proud." You gave him a voice. Tears blurred my vision. No one had said those words to me before. Not once. When Jason returned, he saw the glisten on his mother's cheeks, my reddened eyes, and the silence that carried more weight than words. He didn't ask, but I knew he wanted to. His jaw flexed, his gaze sharp, yet for the first time, he didn't look like a man in control of everything. He looked like a man shut out of something he longed to understand. The following week, Clara insisted that I join them after her meal. She patted the seat beside her, gesturing for me to sit. My manager nearly had a heart attack, but what could I do? Saying no to the Roys was impossible. That night, Clara asked me to teach Jason a few signs. He resisted at first, shaking his head. "Mother, I'm too busy for this." But Clara's stern glare silenced him. Reluctantly, he turned to me. "Fine, teach me something simple." I smiled faintly and signed, "Hello." He copied, his movements stiff, clumsy. Clara laughed, a light, melodic laugh that turned heads across the restaurant. Jason sighed but tried again, this time smoother. "Better," I said softly. He smirked, tilting his head. "Your standards must be low," I blushed, fumbling for another sign. "No," I whispered. "I just believe effort matters more than perfection." For a flicker of a second, Jason's eyes softened. His smirk faded, replaced by something quieter. "Effort, huh? I suppose that's rare in my world." From that night onward, Jason often asked me small things. "How do you say thank you? How do you sign good night?" Sometimes I caught him practicing silently when he thought no one was watching, but not everyone was pleased with this growing connection. One evening, as I returned from clearing a table, I overheard 2 waiters whispering in the hallway. "She's playing a game." "Don't you see? She's making the billionaire notice her." "Smart move, though." "Rich man, rich life. Wait till the manager finds out. She'll be fired for overstepping." I froze, my heart pounding. Their words wrapped around me like chains. I wanted to scream that I wasn't playing any game, that I didn't seek Jason's attention, that I only wanted to be useful to his mother. But my shy nature chained my voice, as always. That night I walked home heavy with doubt. Was I overstepping? Was I in some unspoken way crossing a line? The next evening, when Jason and Clara arrived again, I avoided their table as much as I could. I sent another waitress with their menus, though Clara's eyes searched the room for me. When she finally caught sight of me at the counter, she waved me over insistently. Jason's gaze followed me as I approached, reluctant and nervous. Clara immediately signed, "Why are you avoiding me?" I flushed. My hands hesitated before I signed. "I don't want trouble." Jason leaned forward, his voice low but firm. "What trouble?" The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "People think I'm trying to impress you, to use you." My voice cracked and my eyes burned. "But I'm not. I swear I'm not." For a long moment, silence hung between us. Clara looked from me to her son, her expression unreadable. Then, to my shock, Jason spoke softly, almost too softly for a man like him. "I know you're not." I looked up, startled. His eyes were steady, sincere. "My mother has smiled more in the past 2 weeks than she has in years." "Do you think I care what people whisper?" "Let them talk." Clara reached for my hand, nodding firmly. Her fingers signed, You are family now, family. The word struck me like a thunderclap. Me, a waitress, an orphan of dreams, called family by a billionaire's mother. It was in that moment I realized something terrifying and beautiful. My life was no longer just mine. Somehow, unknowingly, I had become woven into theirs, and though my heart warned me to step back, another part whispered louder, "Perhaps, for once, destiny has chosen you too." The next chapter of my strange new life unfolded on a stormy Friday night. The restaurant was packed, the air buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and the faint hum of a live piano. The kind of evening where everything shimmered on the surface, but beneath, something waited to break. Jason and Clara arrived later than usual. Jason looked sharper than ever in a charcoal suit, but his face was tight, drawn, as though he carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders. Clara, however, greeted me with her warmest smile, her hands rising immediately in her graceful language. "I missed you." Those simple words made my heart swell. I bowed slightly, my fingers moving. "I missed you too." But that night, shadows lurked around the edges of the golden light. Halfway through the evening, as I delivered their main course, a commotion broke out at the entrance. Paparazzi. A swarm of them had somehow slipped past security, cameras flashing like lightning. Jason's jaw clenched as he stood, shielding his mother instinctively. "Back off!" he barked, but the chaos only grew. In the frenzy, one of the journalists shouted cruelly, "Is it true your mother's condition makes her a burden to the family?" The words struck like a slap. Clara flinched, confused. She couldn't hear, but she felt the tension, the eyes, the judgment. Jason's fists clenched at his sides, fury radiating off him. Something inside me snapped. Before I knew it, I stepped forward, placing myself between Clara and the cameras. My hands flew up in rapid, sharp signs, my voice trembling but firm as I translated for her. "They are asking if you are a burden." "Do you want me to answer?" Clara's eyes burned with fire. She straightened her back, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier, and signed with commanding precision. "Tell them this. My silence does not make me weak. My son built his empire on my guidance. Without me, there would be no Roy legacy." The room froze. Guests, staff, even the paparazzi watched as I translated, my voice shaking with emotion. She says, her silence does not make her weak. Her son built his empire on her guidance. Without her, there would be no Roy legacy. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Jason's eyes widened as he looked at his mother with a mixture of pride and awe. The paparazzi faltered, their cruel smirks fading into stunned silence. Then one of them sneered, "And who are you to speak for her?" "Just a waitress." Before he could finish, Jason stepped forward, his voice cutting like steel. "She is the only one here who listens to my mother. Something none of you have ever done." The room fell silent. Clara's hand found mine under the table, squeezing it tightly. Her eyes glistened with tears, but they were not of sadness. They were of pride. For a moment I forgot the flashing cameras, the murmurs, the accusing stares. All I saw was the billionaire's mother looking at me as if I were her own daughter. Later that night, after the chaos had been cleared and the paparazzi escorted out, I found myself in the back corridor of the restaurant, trying to steady my breath. My hands still shook from the confrontation. Jason appeared suddenly, his tall frame blocking the dim light. For once, his usual armor of confidence seemed cracked. "You didn't have to do that," he said quietly. I swallowed. Someone had to. He studied me for a long moment. "You risked your job, your reputation, for her." I looked down, twisting the hem of my apron. "She's not just anyone, she deserves to be heard." Jason stepped closer, his voice dropping. "Do you know how rare that is? People don't risk anything for us. They want our money, our name, our power, but never us. Tonight, you stood in front of the world and chose her. No one has ever done that." I dared to glance up. His eyes, usually so cold and commanding, softened into something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude? Admiration? Or something more dangerous, something that made my heart race. "Thank you," he whispered, and those two words from a billionaire felt heavier than gold. But not everyone was moved by my actions. The next morning, as I arrived for my shift, the manager called me into his office. His face was red, his voice sharp. "What were you thinking, Anjali? You embarrassed this establishment last night. You think you're some kind of savior?" I froze. I was only protecting... Protecting? He slammed a hand on the desk. "Do you realize those were VIPs? Do you realize your job is to serve, not to speak?" Tears stung my eyes. For a moment, I thought he would fire me on the spot. But before he could say another word, a knock sounded at the door. Jason Roy himself stepped in. The manager paled, his bluster vanishing instantly. "Mr. Roy!" "What an honor." Jason cut him off with a single glance. He turned to me, his expression unreadable, and said simply, "You're coming with me." I blinked, confused. "Well, what?" He didn't explain. He just extended his hand, and in that moment, for reasons I couldn't comprehend, I placed mine in his as he led me out of the office past the stunned staff. I realized with a jolt, the secret was out. I was no longer just a waitress. I had become something far more dangerous, someone who mattered to the Roy family, and the world was about to notice. The weeks that followed were nothing short of transformative. For the first time in her life, Nora felt like she wasn't invisible. Each day at the restaurant brought her closer to a bond she had never imagined. A bond with Madame Eleanor, and strangely, with Richard too. She had walked in as a shy waitress with trembling hands, but she was slowly becoming someone people actually noticed. Eleanor began to visit the restaurant more often. She would wait for Nora's shift, her face lighting up whenever she saw the young woman appear. The way they communicated in sign language made other customers stop and stare. For most people it was just a series of hand movements, but for Eleanor it was life itself. For Richard, it was something even more powerful, proof that kindness could bridge any silence. But not everyone liked it. The staff had begun to whisper, "She thinks she's special because she knows sign language. What if the billionaire is giving her more attention than she deserves?" The gossip swirled through the kitchen and corridors like smoke. Nora heard it all, though she never replied. She kept her eyes down, kept her work neat, and swallowed the sting in silence. At night she wrote in her diary, "I only wanted to help. Why do people look at me like I don't belong?" Then one night everything shifted. A wealthy customer, drunk on his own arrogance, snapped at Nora as she set down his drink. "Waitresses like you should know your place," he sneered. "Serving food doesn't make you important. Don't try to rise above your station." The words fell heavy in the air, making the room go quiet. Nora felt the sting immediately, her throat tightening as tears filled her eyes. She wanted to disappear, to retreat back into the shadows where she had always lived. Before she could step away, Richard rose from his seat. He walked over with that commanding presence only a man of his stature carried. His voice cut through the silence. "This young woman is not just a waitress. She is my mother's voice. When you insult her, you insult my family. And I do not tolerate anyone disrespecting my family." His words were sharp, final, and undeniable. The customer froze, pale and humiliated. The entire restaurant buzzed with shock. Eleanor's eyes brimmed with tears as she lifted her hands in sign language. "Thank you, Richard. Tonight you finally understood my heart." Nora's breath caught in her chest. She had never imagined anyone, let alone a billionaire, would defend her with such intensity. The very next day, Eleanor asked Nora to visit their home. Nora could barely believe it as she stepped into the mansion, her small shoes echoing against marble floors. Everything around her screamed of wealth she could never even dream of, but what touched her most was when Eleanor opened her arms and embraced her. With trembling hands, she signed, "You are like a daughter to me. You gave me back a voice I thought I had lost forever." Richard stood silently nearby, but for the first time Nora saw something soften in his face. His guarded walls seemed to lower, just slightly, and in his eyes there was warmth that hadn't been there before. From that day, the whispers among the staff began to fade. People who had once doubted her now looked at her with admiration. One of the waiters who had once mocked her approached quietly and said, "You showed us all that respect can't be bought. It's earned. You've made us proud." For Nora, those words meant more than any money could. Richard watched all of this quietly, almost too quietly. He admired the way Nora carried herself, not with arrogance, but with dignity. He noticed how she never demanded respect, but somehow always received it. At night, when Eleanor smiled because of her, Richard realized something he wasn't ready to admit out loud. She isn't just my mother's angel. She might be mine too. Yet he held the thought inside, unsure how a billionaire and a shy waitress could ever belong to the same world. Still, the truth was undeniable. Nora was no longer just a waitress. She was already becoming part of their family. The night was quiet, the kind of silence that holds its own weight. Nora sat in the mansion's garden, her blue shirt catching the glow of the lanterns hung across the terrace. She had been invited again, not as a waitress but as a guest. Eleanor had insisted, almost demanded, that she come. Nora sat nervously, her hands folded in her lap, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside her. Eleanor appeared first, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She smiled warmly at Nora and signed, "I told you before, you are like a daughter to me. Tonight, I want you to believe that." Nora's eyes shimmered with tears. She signed back with trembling hands, "I don't deserve this. I'm just a waitress." Eleanor shook her head firmly and touched Nora's cheek with gentle affection. "You gave me back something I thought was gone forever. My son gave me wealth, but you gave me a voice. That makes you priceless." Richard appeared soon after. He looked different tonight, less like the intimidating billionaire the world knew, and more like a man carrying secrets too long kept inside. He stood a moment, watching the two women who had somehow transformed his life in just a matter of weeks. "Mother," he said softly, "may I speak to Nora alone?" Eleanor glanced at him knowingly, then smiled at Nora, kissed her forehead, and walked back inside, leaving them beneath the garden lights. For a while, Richard said nothing. He simply looked at her. Nora's heart beat so loudly she was afraid he could hear it. Finally, he took a step closer. "Do you know what you've done to my mother?" Nora blinked nervously. I only wanted to help. I didn't mean to overstep." He shook his head. "No, you didn't just help. You gave her back her joy." "I haven't seen her laugh in years, Nora, and you—" His voice caught. He exhaled deeply before continuing. "You did what I couldn't. You made her feel alive again." She looked down, her cheeks warm, unsure of how to respond. But then he lifted her chin gently so their eyes met. "And do you know what you've done to me?" Her breath stilled. I don't understand. I came into that restaurant every week out of duty, out of habit. My world has been full of deals, contracts, and cold conversations. But the day I saw you signing to my mother, everything shifted. For the first time, I saw sincerity. For the first time, I felt something real." Nora's chest tightened, her heart racing in disbelief. "But I'm just a waitress, Richard. You're a billionaire. Our worlds—" "Don't say it," he interrupted, his voice low but firm. "I don't care about worlds. I don't care about titles. I care about the woman who stood with dignity when others tried to break her. The woman who treated my mother with more love than I ever gave her. The woman who reminded me what it means to feel human again." Tears slipped down Nora's cheeks. She shook her head in disbelief. "Why me?" "You could have anyone, because no one else is you." His words were simple, but they landed with the weight of truth. There was a long pause, filled only by the sound of the night breeze moving through the trees. Then Richard did something he had never done before. He reached for her hand. Nora's fingers trembled in his, but she didn't pull away. Inside the mansion, Eleanor watched quietly from a window. A tear rolled down her cheek, but this one was of joy. She lifted her hands in sign language, though no one could see her. Finally, he has found his heart. Nora looked at Richard, her voice breaking as she whispered, "I don't know if I'm brave enough for this." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Then let me be brave enough for both of us. Just stay by my side." At that moment, something inside Nora shifted. For years she had been invisible, overlooked, whispered about. But tonight she realized she was seen, not just as a waitress, but as someone worthy of love, of respect, of belonging. Richard pulled her gently into his arms, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, kindness and courage could change destiny. The garden lights flickered softly above them. Eleanor's silent blessing surrounded them, and in that quiet night, the shy waitress and the billionaire finally found each other. Their story wasn't about wealth, power, or status. It was about a voice restored, a heart awakened, and a love that left everyone shocked, but also deeply moved. Because sometimes the greatest miracles happen in silence, spoken only through the language of the heart.